If you wanted to create a housing crisis, you would pretty much do to the letter what we've done in Britain in the last 40 years. You would sell off council houses, more than 1 million, and you would stop councils from replacing them, from rebuilding them.
I read that new research has found that a staggering 19% of renters have had to move at least 5 times in the last 5 years due to, either rent rises or landlords selling up. I mean, that is terrifying.
The startling increase in the number of families with no permanent place to call home.
There's a shocking rise of rental scams in the UK.
I don't have a house, I don't have any kids, I don't have a partner, I don't have anything. This country literally sucks living life out of you.
The UK is experiencing a serious rental crisis. Rents are skyrocketing, homelessness is on the rise, and the people falling victims to rental scams are increasing. In this video, we are going to explore the cause and consequences of this rental crisis and if there is truly a way out. Hi, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. My channel is all about social commentary, motivational and educational content, so if this is the type of content you like, feel free to subscribe down below. So let's get into it. The UK cost of living is hitting renters the hardest. With inflation at its highest in decades, tenants are struggling to keep up with the rising rents while managing soaring costs of essentials like food and energy. As we know, statistics shows that the UK's rent has increased by 10% since 2023, with London seeing the rise of 15%. For many, renting is no longer a stepping stone to home ownership, but it's a permanent state. And with wages stagnating, renters are spending an increasing unsustainable portion of their income on housing. Due to this rental crisis, we're also experiencing the issue of homelessness. As we can see in the UK in recent many years, we've seen an increasing number of homelessness on the street. There are overcrowded shelters and loads of families living in temporary accommodation. Homelessness isn't just about rough sleeping. Temporary accommodation is a sort of homelessness in itself, being pushed from one place to another over and over again when the council can't afford to keep renting that specific temporary accommodation for people. People are surfing from one area to the other, and even overcrowding in houses as well, just because people or young people can't afford to find another place to live because of how expensive it actually is. If you look at the rental market now and you look at on Zoopla, Rightmove, you will see on average for a 1-bedroom in London can go for like 1,600 upwards to like 2,000, and you find yourself in a box room. It's not even worth the price, right? And it leaves many young people without, with only the option to either flat share or stay at home, right? Or it leaves people in abusive circumstances as well, where they need to share or stay with a partner that they might not even want to be with. Due to people's desperation, scammers have taken advantage of this situation. And there are many scams online. You can find most of the scams on platforms like Facebook, where the platform looks so beautiful, but the rent is so very low, and they fall a victim to scamming. And Channel 4 recently did a documentary on this scam. I will insert the documentary below, but I will probably insert a very short clip here as well.
Found a property on Open Rent, which I used all throughout university. There can be 20 people at a viewing, so sometimes finding places that are put up directly by the landlord, maybe I could cut the queue a little bit.
By helping connect owners directly with renters, Open Rent say they make renting fairer, safer and cheaper.
I reached out to the landlord and arranged a viewing. My partner and I went to the viewing. We took a video of the property. We met an estate agent at the door. He talked us through the process. There were about 4 or 5 other couples going to look at the viewing. That just added to the pressure of needing to be first in there. Immediately got home and I actually had a phone call with the landlord. I'd had some advice from colleagues and friends to say perhaps you could put some rent up front. That's how we got our property. So I said, look, we would be able to pay a little bit of rent up front. And he said, look, if you can pay 6 months, that would be great. That will secure it. That was a total of £8,100 for 6 months of rent up front. We didn't have anywhere to live. I even spoke to the bank and they had checked the details of the receiving account. I had a confirmation from the estate agent and we arranged a date to collect the keys. On the day that we were due to collect the keys, obviously we were super excited. It got to about 5 o'clock on the Friday and I hadn't heard back from the landlord. It got to 8 o'clock and I started to panic a little bit. So I made the decision to get into an Uber. I went to the property and I knocked on the door. And the guy who answered told me that it was actually an Airbnb and he had been renting it for the next 5 days. The whole property wasn't available for rent. It was just an Airbnb.
You can watch that documentary and it really allows you to understand how people's desperation and, these evil scammers taking advantage due to, the rental crisis. People just want a nice place to live in, but they're not able to because it's so expensive. And with how wages are now, a lot of people aren't able to afford it. And because, even home ownership, if you look at it, people need to save tens of thousands of pounds just to be able to get on the property ladder. And because people are trying to, buy food, pay utilities, some people aren't even able to save up in order to get a home. So renting becomes a second option, but then renting takes your money and you're not able to save. So it creates this endless cycle of just trying to survive, right? Just trying to survive and do the best you can in a world where the cost of living crisis is due to also the rental crisis, and the cost of living crisis is due to the rental crisis because rents are so high you can't afford other essentials in your life, right? So it's just this circular need for survival in a time where wages are going up, aren't in line with the cost of living crisis, right? So this is why I always tell people to have another source of income, which in today's day is even hard because your job or your 9 to 5 takes over your life and you can't even find the time or the energy to even find another source of income, or jobs that you want don't pay enough. So let's look much deeper at the rental crisis. So why is the rental crisis a big serious issue currently? We know that social housing, right? Social housing, as you know, are for those who are more deprived or unable to afford, privatized housing. Even when we look at social housing, a lot of social housing landlords are increasing their rent to a rate where local councils can't even afford to rent those accommodations. So we see a lot of people being put in temporary housing because of those issues.
This has learned of a startling increase in the number of families with no permanent place to call home. New research shared exclusively with us by the charity Crisis found there's been a 10% increase in homelessness in England in the last 2 years. That's nearly 250,000 households. Many work but simply cannot afford spiralling private rents, and there simply aren't enough council homes. So they are stuck moving between hotels, beds and breakfasts, hostels or on friends' sofas. We even found one family living in a tent. Such homelessness places parents and their children under enormous stress, and some are being told by councils they may have to move hundreds of miles from their local area. Here's our investigations correspondent, Daniel Hewitt, on those with no home and no hope.
So if you do let me know.
Aurora has been homeless for half of her life. This little 11-month-old has learned to crawl, to play, and now almost walk in cramped, overcrowded hotel rooms, surrounded by boxes and bags of belongings, and her 2 brothers, all bereft of home.
It was snowing and I thought, I'm on the street with a baby. It was horrible, and I remember just sitting in the car and crying.
Mum Michaela juggles her job in a factory with trying to find somewhere to live. She's rented privately for 13 years, but in February became homeless. With no council homes available, she's moved from hotel to hotel in North London. Have you tried to find anywhere to rent privately?
There's nothing that's affordable, nothing. Even if I didn't have any bills to pay, I didn't eat food, I still would not be able to afford the price they're charging.
So one of the other causes of this rental crisis that we're facing, especially across the UK, is due to schemes like the Right to Buy scheme, which allows people who are less fortunate to get on the property ladder through the Right to Buy scheme. But this also means that there is less stock of properties for the council, right? So although it does let people get onto the property ladder who may not have been able to through a normal, way to get on the property ladder, this is really affecting the amount of social housing we do have in the UK. Hence why the Labour government decided that from the 21st of November 2024 that they would decrease the discount significantly due to this issue itself. And another issue I want to talk about was due to buy-to-let investors as well. Due to, this increase of getting into property, getting into this, getting into that, especially property is become a very trending way to earn money now. So people want to get as much profit as possible. So they're going to increase the rent to get that profit. Due to that increase, a lot of people can't afford to rent. All these major developments as well is another reason why a lot of people can't afford, houses anymore. If you see an average 1-bedroom flat, luxurious flat in London goes from upwards of 1,600 to even the 2,000s of pounds, right? A lot of people on the normal wages, if you see the average wage in London is around £33,000 or more. Don't quote me on that. But that is an average of like around £2,100 a month. If people are spending £1,600 on rent, what does that leave them? They can't afford a lot of other things, right? And these big developments are also causing gentrification by pushing people out of their area who can no longer afford the rents that are being put by these huge developments.
If you wanted to create a housing crisis, you would pretty much do to the letter what we've done in Britain in the last 40 years. You would sell off council houses, more than 1 million, and you would stop councils from replacing them, from rebuilding them. You would have house price inflation, so people on low and then modest incomes can no longer afford to buy a home, which pushes them into the private rental sector. You then don't regulate or reform the private rental sector to give renters any protection against quick-fire evictions. And then on top of that, you consistently don't build enough houses. So rent goes up, competition goes up, and you end up in situations like this.
There needs to be some sort of regulation that the new government needs to put into place. For me, I would definitely love some sort of rental cap, but I know a lot of people have controversies around the rental cap, how it's going to be regulated, etc. But that makes the most sense. But yeah, that is just my opinion. I think let's move to the next topic of this video essay. So there is a human cost to this rental crisis. As we can see already, many people and families are in overcrowded housing. A lot of people who are professionals who have gone through the education system are living in flat shares, unable to afford your own place to live, right? People who are on pensions are spending your whole pensions on rent. What sort of life are we living in the UK?
I just don't want to do this anymore. so cold in here, as you can see. I'm wrapped up in a duvet. My son's got like 3 different layers on, just to try and stay warm because it's so cold in here.
Watching that woman's video broke my heart this morning. She said she had to choose between gas and electric, and she ended up choosing electric because she needed to cook for her children to eat, and that the gas, she couldn't afford it. So she was literally freezing and shaking in that video, as you can see. And people are going through a lot in the UK right now. It's not even a joke. It is not a joke. Especially when you live in these old houses that were built ages ago. The insulation is bad.
What sort of life where you need to pay most of your wages towards rent and you can't afford to enjoy the benefits of rent? And that's the human cost of this whole rental crisis itself, because people are suffering in this UK. People are unable to enjoy their lives because all they are worried about is about paying bills, is about paying their rent. And it's so sad, right? It's so sad. But I want to talk about how we can, as a society in the UK especially, overcome this, huge rental crisis. I feel as in the UK we can overcome this rental crisis is by building more social affordable housing. Affordable is, as I've always said, is a questionable term, because affordable to a lot of these developers or is not affordable at all. We need to speak to people and look at the wages that people are earning and make sure that rent is truly affordable for people. We need to regulate rents, right? I know there is more regulation that is coming up from the Labour Party in terms of regulating rents in Section 21, in terms of like no fault eviction that has now been passed through Parliament. But regulation as in the start of the rent to, years to come, etc. We need to have more of that. I would propose a rent cap, right? A rent cap for a certain amount of years. If something is a certain amount of rent, there should be a rent cap for God knows how long. But that also depends on the interest rate of mortgages as well. So there's a lot of things like to unpack, and the government needs to think about that as well. Another way would be to strengthen tenants' rights. As we can see, Labour has passed the renter rights bill, I believe, which would put better regulations to Section 21, which means landlords would not be able to do no-fault evictions, etc. And there'll be much greater rights to tenants as well. For example, they can't just say that pets aren't allowed for no reasons, which they could do before. So we are moving closer towards that greater rights for tenants. But yeah, there needs to be a lot more done on that as well. And we need to find a way to regulate scammers on the internet who are making people victims to their rental scams. So platforms like Facebook, they need to work closely with the government. Even on platforms like, what's it called? That platform, I forgot. I'll insert it here. But it's so easy to scam on that platform, and there's no sort of regulation to do that. So I think Labour is bringing in some sort of thing that every single landlord needs to have in order to even go onto those platforms, which hopefully will come soon in summer. These things won't happen overnight, but it's worth pushing for these reforms to happen, so people can have a better, quality of life, because quality of life is important. And in my opinion, I don't even think we should pay money for rent, for somewhere to live. I think that should be a universal right. But in this capitalist society that we do live in, that is not what is happening. So we need to find a better way to regulate rents, make sure rents are capped at a certain amount, better rights for tenants, etc. Because we do know landlords, there are very bad rogue landlords out there which will leave you with mold on your wall, broken boiler, leaking wall, leaking God knows what, but won't do anything about it. And there needs to be greater, harsher punishments for those issues, and those landlords who don't care about their tenants. But yeah, that was my own thought piece on this rental crisis that we have in the UK. I know I could have gone a lot more in depth, but I just want to keep this short and sweet, and just talk more about the rental crisis and its cause and its consequences. So this rental crisis is a very complicated issue that needs to be addressed, and people need to be involved in the talks. But yeah, that's the end of my video. I hope you make sure you comment and subscribe to my channel, and see you in the next one.